How should those African leaders be greeted who like to side with the Western countries and ignore the welfare of their own people?
Okay, on a quick note, let's look at how this man, William Ruto, that is the president of Kenya, how he was badly embarrassed, by the president of Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traore. Let's just look at how this man, Ibrahim Traore, embarrassed William Ruto in Ghana during the inauguration of Ghana's president, John Mahama. The both parties were invited, but unfortunately, Ibrahim Traore stole the show. Everybody, all eyes were on Ibrahim Traore. Nobody recognized any other African leaders except Ibrahim Traore. So let's just watch this video, and at the end of the day, try to analyze what we learned from this video. Just so watch to the end.
How should those African leaders be greeted who like to side with the Western countries and ignore the welfare of their own people? They prioritize the interests of the Western countries and Western corporations over the interests of Africans, despite being in key positions like the presidency. Well, until now, bold African leaders met the puppet leaders to give the impression that Africa is united. It was their humble nature. However, Ibrahim Traore does not want the West's puppet in Africa to feel honored by greeting them. One such leader, having the reputation of being the West's puppet, is Kenya's President William Ruto. He always prioritized being a friend of the West over caring for his own people and African unity on a broader scale. He was present at the inauguration of Ghana's new president, where Ibrahim Traore reached and met other presidents. However, Ibrahim Traore intentionally made Ruto embarrassed, so he knows he is disliked among the loyal leaders of Africa. President Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso and President William Ruto of Kenya share a stage in African leadership, but their divergent ideologies and approaches to governance highlight the growing geopolitical and philosophical divide. This split was on full display during Ghanaian President John Mahama's inauguration, where Traore's deliberate avoidance of Ruto symbolized a broader rejection of Western-aligned leadership and ideologies. Traore's stance is symbolic of a new wave of African leaders who prioritize sovereignty and defiance of neo-colonialism over adherence to traditional democratic norms championed by the West. At John Mahama's inauguration, other African leaders like Paul Kagame were present, and Ibrahim Traore met them. However, he deliberately ignored William Ruto. That's because while Traore's presence exuded strength and a clear message of anti-colonial defiance, Ruto's alignment with Western rhetoric on governance and democracy made him an unwelcome figure in Traore's orbit. Their lack of interaction was not an isolated incident, but rather a deliberate political statement, showing Traore's vision for a liberated Africa, free from Western influence and its loyal proxies. President Ibrahim Traore has positioned himself as a revolutionary leader in Africa, advocating for sovereignty and resistance against neo-colonialism, particularly French influence in West Africa. Since his rise to power in September 2022, following a coup that ousted Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba, Traore has been vocal in his criticism of Western interference in African affairs. His rhetoric has resonated across the continent, particularly in regions burdened by foreign exploitation. Therefore, Traore's leadership style displays a rejection of Western-imposed governance models, which he argues have failed to address Africa's unique challenges. In this context, how can Ibrahim Traore meet a Western proxy put in place to ensure Western interests? In contrast to Traore, President William Ruto of Kenya has embraced Western ideologies that undoubtedly serve Western interests and Western powers. His public condemnation of the military coup in Niger, which deposed President Mohamed Bazoum, reflects this alignment. By labeling the coup as unconstitutional and calling for Bazoum's reinstatement, Ruto showed his loyalty to the West. You see, Ruto's rhetoric resonates with Western nations. To Traore and his allies, Ruto's position represents a betrayal of the continent's struggle for true sovereignty. In this context, the Ghanaian inauguration, intended to celebrate African political solidarity, instead became a stage for contrasting visions of Africa's future. Traore's arrival, characterized by his signature military uniform and an imposing security detail, was a calculated display of defiance and sovereignty. His avoidance of Ruto was more than a diplomatic slight. It was a symbolic rejection of the Western-aligned governance model Ruto represents. Interestingly, Traore's refusal to honor leaders like Ruto stems from his belief that they perpetuate Western dominance in Africa. For decades, African nations have grappled with the effects of neocolonialism, where Western powers maintain influence through economic policies, military agreements, and political alliances. And all this is possible because the West can find leaders that are ready to play the role of puppets. However, Traore's rise represents a break from this cycle, advocating for self-determination and the rejection of Western meddling. Ruto's condemnation of Niger's coup, framed as a defense of the so-called democratic principles, directly opposes Traore's narrative. To Traore and his allies, military takeovers are not violations of democracy, but necessary interventions to dismantle corrupt, foreign-backed regimes that have failed their citizens. This ideological divide is at the heart of Traore's mistrust of leaders like Ruto, who he perceives as enablers of neo-colonial control. Furthermore, the thought that Ruto is aligned with the same foreign entities who tried to stage a coup against him and even carry out an assassination attempt gives this divide a personal touch. Since taking power, he has survived multiple assassination attempts and coup plots, many of which are rumored to have connections to foreign powers seeking to destabilize his government. Therefore, his decision to avoid engaging with Ruto at the Ghanaian inauguration reflects this heightened vigilance. But what more has Ruto done that strengthens the rumors of him being a West's puppet? Before we continue further, tell us, are you enjoying the video? If yes, please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black Africa. Let's continue now. Interestingly, the claims of Ruto being a West's puppet were primarily spearheaded by opposition leader Raila Odinga and repeated by critics such as the Communist Party of Kenya. They stem from a series of Ruto's decisions and alliances that appear to prioritize Western interests over Kenyan sovereignty. From lifting the decade-long ban on genetically modified organisms to deepening military and economic ties with Western nations, Ruto's policies have fueled skepticism about his administration's motivations and allegiances. Raila Odinga's criticisms are rooted in the perception that Ruto's government has failed to uphold the principles of self-reliance and has instead aligned itself with Western multinationals and powers. The decision to lift the ban on GMO maize, for instance, was presented as a response to Kenya's food insecurity, exacerbated by drought. However, Raila has argued that the move serves the interests of foreign biotechnology firms, particularly those in the US, at the expense of Kenyan farmers and consumers. By importing 10 million bags of GMO maize, Kenya opened itself to dependency on Western agricultural giants, raising fears of a modern form of economic colonization. Raila described this policy as a betrayal of Kenyan autonomy, accusing Ruto of making unilateral decisions without public consultation. Ruto's alignment with Western powers extends beyond agriculture. His administration's foreign policy marks a stark departure from his predecessors, who cultivated close ties with China to finance infrastructure projects. In less than 100 days after taking office, Ruto met with prominent Western figures, including US Secretary of State Antony Blinken and UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. One of the most contentious aspects of Ruto's administration is its militarization of Kenya's relationship with the West. Kenya's designation as a major non-NATO ally, with the establishment of US and British military bases on Kenyan soil, has raised alarms about the country's increasing involvement in global military conflicts. The expansion of the British military base in Nanyuki and the use of Manda Island in Lamu for US military operations are seen as concessions that compromise Kenya's national security. The Communist Party of Kenya has labeled these actions as acts of treason, accusing Ruto of turning Kenya into a pawn in Western military escapades. The presence of these foreign bases not only surrenders critical territory to external powers, but also risks making Kenya a target in geopolitical conflicts beyond its control. Ruto's foreign policy stance has also drawn ire due to his vocal support for Western positions on international issues. His condemnation of the military coup in Niger, which ousted President Mohamed Bazoum, aligns with Western and African Union norms, but alienates leaders like Burkina Faso's Ibrahim Traore and Mali's Assimi Goïta. These military leaders, who have formed an anti-Western bloc, view Ruto's rhetoric as a betrayal of Africa's fight against neo-colonialism. By siding with Western powers and denouncing military-led governments, Ruto has positioned himself as an antagonist to this bloc, further isolating Kenya in a rapidly shifting African political landscape. The Communist Party of Kenya has been particularly scathing in its critique of Ruto, accusing him of perpetuating economic and social inequalities through policies dictated by the International Monetary Fund and World Bank. These institutions, often seen as enforcers of Western economic hegemony, have long been criticized for imposing austerity measures that exacerbate poverty and inequality in developing nations. Ruto's fiscal policies, shaped by these institutions, are viewed as a continuation of Kenya's economic subservience to foreign powers, betraying the aspirations of the Kenyan people for self-determination and prosperity. Additionally, Ruto's support for Ukraine, framed as solidarity with Western democratic values, is criticized as CIA-scripted propaganda, diverting attention from Kenya's pressing domestic challenges. Raila Odinga and other critics argue that Ruto's actions reflect a deeper moral failing. Once seen as a champion of the common Kenyan, Ruto has been accused of abandoning his base to enrich the elite and perpetuate systemic corruption. For his part, Ruto and his deputy, Rigathi Gachagua, have dismissed these criticisms as baseless attacks from a jealous opposition. Gachagua's assertion that Ruto is nobody's puppet and will work with all global partners, East, West, North, and South, has done little to quell concerns. Critics argue that such statements are a rhetorical cover for policies that disproportionately favor Western powers, further entrenching Kenya's dependency on foreign influence. Ibrahim Traore knows all this, and he is not a hypocritical leader who keeps things in his heart and meets with puppet leaders with a smile on his face. Therefore, he preferred not to meet William Ruto and show that he doesn't like to interact with African leaders who wear masks, giving the impression that they work for the people but secretly, they ensure Western interests. What do you think? Should Ibrahim Traore have met William Ruto, forgetting that he is more loyal to the West than to Africa? Or did he do the right thing by making Ruto realize that he has tarnished his reputation and is disliked? In the comment section right below, share your take on why Ibrahim Traore didn't meet Ruto and ignored him.
Okay, such is a beautiful video, I must say. It's a beautiful video, no doubts, and I guess you really enjoyed the video. But if I'm to ask you, what do you learn from the video? Like, what do you learn from the video? To me personally, over the years, William Ruto has been seen or known as a puppet leader. One may ask, who is a puppet leader, or what does the word puppet mean? Puppet or puppet leader. A puppet leader is a leader who is working for somebody, who is in a secret alliance with somebody. An African puppet leader is someone who is always working for the interest of the West. That is just it. So, over the years, William Ruto has been seen as a puppet leader, and this is how Ibrahim Traore has seen this man. He is always in contact with, if not French presidents, US president. So he's always in contact with some of these foreign people that people like Ibrahim Traore don't want anymore. As we know, Ibrahim Traore, that is Burkina Faso, together with Niger and Mali, who happens to be in alliance together, known as the AES, has been constantly in fights or in a battle with France. France happens to be the colonizers of these countries, but unfortunately these countries have risen up to say they no longer want their colonized masters again, or they no longer want their masters anymore. According to them, they say these their masters, France, is taking so much from them, is consuming them. France is looting every resources they have, and they no longer want them. So these countries has tried to chase away anything that has to do with France in their country. While this thing is going on, while this thing is happening, the president of Kenya, that is William Ruto, is always showing on the news how he contacted France, how he even there is one that happened recently where William Ruto came out and was saying he has contacted Emmanuel Macron, that is the France president, about the ongoing violence happening in Congo. It also sparked another reaction, like everybody started trolling him. Hey, you puppet leader, why are you always calling your slave masters whenever things happen? Why are you always calling them? Like, does it mean you can't survive on your own? This is what's going on. You get it? This is what's going on. So, William Ruto, the Kenyan president, has always been seen as a leader who is not interested on how to develop Africa. He has always been seen as a leader who is more interested in his relationship with foreign people or foreign leaders. This is why Ibrahim Traore is always avoiding him. Ibrahim Traore is not happy with him. He is not a friend to Ibrahim Traore. Believe me, he is not a friend to Ibrahim Traore. So this is why obviously you see Ibrahim Traore ignores him wherever Ibrahim Traore got invited. If there is an occasion somewhere in Africa, Traore gets invited, and William Ruto also gets invited. Definitely these two leaders not gonna meet. They're not gonna greet themselves, because Ibrahim Traore sees him as a puppet leader. You get? This is just the reason why Ibrahim Traore keep ignoring William Ruto, because he sees him as a puppet leader, a leader or someone who is always working for their master, always working for foreign leaders, who is not interested in how to develop their continent. And you know, sometimes trying to develop your continent involves you pushing aside those people that has been caging your continent for a very long time, or your country for a very long time. And this is what the AES countries, that is Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger, did by chasing them out of their countries. Or you, what do you think about the whole thing? Do you think William Ruto is a puppet leader or not? What do you think about the video you just watched? Let me hear your own opinion, and don't forget, like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.